So I think that that addressing it very systematically and from bottom up really gives the programs in the early childhood field an opportunity to really critically think, what's the next steps? What's the next level that I go to help this child?
Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education. Marilyn, welcome to the Preschool podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you as a guest, Marilyn. You're the owner of ECE Solutions. Let's start off just learning a little bit more about what ECE Solutions is.
Wonderful. So ECE, most in the early childhood field would know that, early childhood education, but I started the company about a year and a half ago. I had worked with an agency previously, a local child care resource network locally, and I started it after realizing that I wanted to have a little bit bigger reach. I wanted to go back into direct contact with directors, daycare centers, and spend a little bit more time in that arena. And I also needed a little more flexibility. Actually, I had another grandchild, and I needed to be able to do a little more traveling. She lives in New York City, and a little bit more flexibility with my time. So returning back into my own business was a natural next progression for me.
Interesting. And what is your background before you were part of the Child Care Resource Network?
Wonderful. So I had owned and operated early childhood programs in Western New York.
Got it.
So I started just small and with family daycare where I would watch 8 children. At that time, the regulations were a little different, so I could watch 8 all day. And that seemed, quite honestly, Ron, a little natural for me because I'm one of 8 children. So having that amount of children, it became really natural to me. But it really started as a first answer to when I came back. I came back to the Buffalo area with 2 of my young children. And it was a pretty typical story where you look around to the area and see what my options are. And I thought I would temporarily care for other children until I found my calling. And as it evolved, I loved the early childhood field. That was not my background. So as I enjoyed the program so much and enjoyed it, I came a little backwards to it. I then earned my degrees and credentials all the time while I was building my business. So I'm a little backwards to many in the early childhood field, and just within the last 7 years, received my master's in.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a little different backwards that my story came from, but it was so it's been quite involved.
And so doing a little bit of reading about ECE Solutions, it's an evidence-based early childhood training and consulting company. What does that mean?
That means a lot of the information. I really view myself as a conduit to share information with the field. So that means my trainings are research-based. My consultant is consultancy with daycare center directors. I do a lot of trainings around the pyramid model. So what that means is the pyramid model is a system and from the Center of Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning. And New York State, this last year, adopted the pyramid model to really roll out across the state. And that really addresses the social and emotional competencies for infants and children. And I was accepted into the program to be a master cadre, a master trainer. And so a lot of my time is spent working with programs, delivering the modules of training to really inform the care and quality of that we are for all the programs. So I spend a lot of time delivering those for either standalone, open to the public, or agencies hire me to come in to train their whole staff, and different modules, different ways to present it.
Interesting. So let's hear a little bit more about this pyramid model. Can you summarize what that's all about?
So, in a few words, the basis is that a typical view of a pyramid, a triangle, is that on the base of the pyramid model is the effective workforce. And the genesis of this is not a new premise. This has been around for a very long time. And it's been on the website. It's been, Head Start was the impetus of it initially. And so a lot of the social emotional competencies are on there. But it's based very philosophically and research-based and data proven to be successful. So what does that mean? They rolled out 3 models for pre-K and then another separate 3 models for infant toddlers. Both modules follow the same format. The basic of any good relationship and environment is the basic premise of once you really establish basic relationships. And when I say relationship and why that is so strong for all programs is the relationship that every one of those staff have with that child makes or can really breaks. I know it's kind of a hard word, breaks, but really makes or breaks the effectiveness and the quality of care for that child.
Yeah.
So when we create these, or when I deliver this information, there's so many aha moments, Ron, that happens around those, because it's really, I view this as a day to reflect. Each of these modules are 6 to 7 hours. Each section of the modules, there's 3 modules in each, pre-K and infant toddler. And the first module is about those relationships, as I mentioned, and then environments. The next is for targeted social emotional supports. So to give you an example, I use the percentages because we all understand data. Yeah. So if you use data as a percentage, and if you had children with that people consider challenging behavior, and if you had 100 children, once you master relationships and environments, and I say relationships so critically because until we take time to think, what are our really hot buttons? If I'm a teacher, what really drives me crazy about this one child? They may not say it, but they feel it. And that's where a lot of the important teaching and information comes from. The next step is, to digress back to percentages. If we master relationships and environment, between 85 and 87% of our challenging behaviors have been addressed in the classroom.
Oh, interesting.
Now, those percentages, I remember when I was going through the training myself, or train the trainer, people get percentages. When we go to the next level, so if we were to have 100 children in a classroom, and a whole program just happens to have challenging behavior, every one of those children. So 85-ish, and there's always a range because it depends on your population, et cetera. Sure. Is that 85 children now have wonderful relationships, and because of you've looked at that, and you've looked at your environment, and you analyze the relationship with the families, which is a critical piece of the pyramid model, because it takes all those 3 legs to make it really successful. Well, then you go up to the next level, that it's very targeted. So let's say, if I may use an example of a little boy or girl, Johnny or Judy might need a little extra. They might need a little extra guidance. They might need a little extra, I don't want to say preemptive strike, but they might need a little extra hand-holding. They might need a little, before you come to circle, I'm going to go over to you directly, specifically, because you might be a little bit more distracted, or maybe you need a little touch on your shoulder. I'm going to do those extra things, or put in those extra little pieces that are going to be helpful for you to succeed. And how do I know that? How do I know what he or she might need? Well, because I have a very good relationship with a child in my classroom, I know what their triggers are. If it's a loud sound, how they get overwhelmed. because my relationship is so good with them, now I know what I'm going to have to do to step it up. So that level is, and again, it's a range, is between 10 to 12% of the children that might need extra little support. Then the very top level is the intensive interventions, and that ranges from 1 to 3%. So if we go back to the 100 children in our classroom, we're now down to 1 to 3 children who need very intensive, very group management, right? A very brainstorming with a therapist, with the parents, with the teacher, with the director, with a really management, there's a word I'm missing right now, but a program support for this child, individual support for this child, right? And so then it becomes very thoughtful and very intentional. One of my aha moments was when I was listening to webinars and different information now, because I'm really delving into this so deeply, is that, and one of the speakers said when we were initially trained, was that no child has ever been asked to leave a daycare program, early childhood program, that has had an amazing relationship with the child, the parent, and the family, and the teacher. So, so critical. If there's broken down in a part of them, that's where the miscommunication can take over. So I think that that addressing it very systematically and from bottom up really gives the programs in the early childhood field an opportunity to really critically think, what's the next steps? What's the next level that I go to help this child? And because it has been an epidemic of the children being asked to leave programs, and I understand that our society is getting a little bit more stressed out. Our staff is getting a little bit more stressed out with the different children in their classrooms. Some of the teachers that that are either in my classes, because I also teach classes online at the graduate level, that they share with me, when some of their students in their class only half speak English, that's another challenge. So where do the supports come from for things like that? So our teachers are doing amazing in these classrooms with the different challenges that they have too. So it's important to understand where each one comes from.
Well, it's super interesting to hear that, 85% of challenges are really directly related to those bottom 3 components of the pyramid. And I guess that's kind of the whole point of the pyramid, right? Is that, let's say if I'm the administrator of a childcare program, where am I first going to focus my efforts? It should be on an effective workforce before above and beyond anything else, because unless I have that, it's all going to kind of crumble.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. And what becomes a particular challenge in our early childhood field is having that effective workforce with the different things that the directors are having to think about in their budgeting. That becomes a challenge when they're looking at when they drive by a Delta Sonic. I use Delta Sonic a lot, actually. One of my pet clients, he was a wonderful manager at Delta Sonic. But when you pass a Delta Sonic board or a fast food, and it talks about what is the starting wages, and that is unfortunately below some of what they can afford to pay, it gets very challenging. So those who are in the field are really, for wonderful reasons, are really very passionate about children, because and hope that down the road there will be the financial support that will follow them. So I think that's always our challenge in the early childhood field.
Yeah, of course. That's the gap we're always trying to close. And I guess the other interesting thing to me about the pyramid is on the other end of the pyramid on the top is that, there is that 1 to 3% of children who are probably going to require some type of more intensive intervention. So I think also a bit of a takeaway for me on that is, you're never going to have a program where 100% of the children are without any challenging behavior. Almost always there is going to be some children who are having some challenging behavior where you are going to require that more intensive intervention. And I think the onus is on you as administrators and educators to take that on and embrace that challenge, because those children are out there, and that is going to be a requirement of your center or your job as an ECE.
Absolutely. And I think I know it's not even a matter of thinking. I know what challenges that the teachers have in the classroom is that when you have so many different wonderful little beings in your world, and taking the time to really observe and reflect on each child, that can be very challenging for programs. Logistically, it can be.
Totally.
So one of my conversations often is with directors in programming, and when I teach about social, emotional, and relationships, is when do you have an opportunity to reflect about that child? Obviously, the observation comes first, and then when do you have a chance to reflect on that child and really talk to your coworker about a particular child to really brainstorm together? That's where staff and programs really sometimes are challenged to really carve out time, because the day is so packed full of important things that have to be done. But building that relationship, I think one of my anytime I train, that individuals know, oh, here she goes again. Relationships are curriculum. They have to be 24/7 in classrooms. You just don't build relationships at circle time or at 2:35 in the afternoon. You have to be aware of the families and what sort of connections that we have with our families when they come in, and really understanding their perspective. That is probably the most aha moments that I have with programs or when I train, taking time to understand the other's perspective about a situation. That piece of communication and understanding interpersonal skills are critical to a program's success.
And to your previous point, that's one of the areas where, early childhood education as a field could certainly use the support from, the powers that be at the state and federal and even municipal levels to, have more resources in early childhood education. So, for example, childcare programs can take on additional staff or assistive staff to allow more time for their educators in the classroom to maybe step away from the classroom to give them that time for reflection and for professional development and training as it relates to communication skills and relationships with families and children and these types of things.
Absolutely. And I think I also believe I did a training just 2 weeks ago. And because of the typical schedule and the budgeting and the demands that a director has, and she or he is wearing so many hats, I jokingly said to the staff, there was about 30 in the group, and I jokingly said to them, well, you know how you have an hour a day just to sit and talk about children? Of course, they all started laughing. And I'm all about baby steps. So if you can't afford or be able to plan for time for teachers to reflect on their practice, is that let's start a baby step. Let's start 10 minutes. How can you possibly carve out? And this program in particular, right when I was there, really did some great brainstorming of how to carve out, at least identify 10 minutes a day that these two teachers will be able to talk about particular children. And although 10 minutes sounds like a very small amount in what can happen in 10 minutes, well, many programs have zero time at all.
Yeah.
So if you start carving out, usually it's by and on the fly, right? A teacher is going out the door and saying, "Oh, Joanne, by the way, Johnny was really struggling at rest time. Make sure you tell Mom about it." And then she flies out the door. That is no one's fault. But what it says to us is we as a field have to carve out just a little more time, because by carving that out, you're really honoring the staff, and that's what directors really want to show their appreciation and valuing their staff, is really trying to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
So the wonderful brainstorming this particular program had of just within the classrooms, because many of the concerns were the teachers, they are the experts of these children in the classrooms. When they come to a director for a problem or a concern, I always suggest to a director, the first question you should ask them is, "Oh, you are the experts in the room. I value your opinion. What do you think? How might we approach this particular problem? Whether it's ordering supplies or whether it's a particular child," that you're really empowering the staff and really honoring them, that within themselves, they have wonderful suggestions if they just dig a little deeper.
So important.
That's one of, oh my heavens.
Yeah.
And I think that very often directors, just out of survival, if someone comes to them for a question, or of course they want to solve it right away. But if we take a step back, and I say that when I'm teaching whole programs, if I'm doing an on-site training for a whole program, is before you go to a supervisor, really think to yourself, do some of your own critical thinking. Mm-hmm. We're asking our children to do critical thinking all the time, even as they're small, of, what words we're going to say to each other, things like that. Well, we need to practice it ourselves as a teacher. What critical thinking can you do to solve this problem or come up with some suggestions? That's when you go to your supervisor. So it seems to be really kind of taking on a life of its own and really seem to be spreading quite nicely.
Yeah. And from the administrator's perspective, that's a common theme we hear as well, just in terms of, if you want to have this time for reflection and empowering your staff and getting their feedback and making sure they have the support they need, you have to be proactive about it and plan for it. Because you are wearing so many hats, it's not just going to sort of happen on its own. You have to sort of think through how you're going to do that, how you're going to create even that 10 minutes of time if, as at least a starting point. So that's very good feedback. Now, you spent over 30 years in early childhood development and education. What advice do you have for our younger listeners out there who are starting out their careers in early childhood education?
Oh, that's a great question. As I'm getting much older, there's some wonderful, many, new directors coming in, the next generation, as I shared with you before, is that really seek out and really tap into those who have been around the industry for quite a while. They find a mentor. I have a couple actually younger directors that I'm mentoring, and really tap into their knowledge, really tap into their own experiences and what happened in the past. But I really want to caution them, be very open to, as you become a member in different organizations. Obviously, there's national, NACE and local organizations to become a member of. But really involve yourself at the really director level and seek out in your community, because as a director, it can be so very isolating.
Right.
Very. And when you're at the top, it becomes like, who do I talk to? And that really was the genesis of my first conference last year, giving them an opportunity to be in the same room with like-minded people and really celebrate the amazing jobs they're doing. Because, 99, I don't know the exact percentage, 96, you'll probably be able to know the percentage better than I, are women in our industry. Yeah. And because women in particular are feeling very, let me go back. Okay, let me go back on that. Is women in our industry are very uncomfortable sometimes with those difficult conversations emotionally. Is they might not want to upset someone, or they might not want to hurt someone's feelings.
Yep.
And that is, quite honestly, some of the most important work I do is having a woman feeling comfortable in their role and understanding others' perspective, and then moving forward of how to connect with others. Because isolation in our industry can be very, very difficult.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think, it's something I never really thought about, but I was thinking as you're talking there that there's so many challenges and difficult situations that you face every single day as the director of a childcare program, as an early childhood educator. And so in those day-to-day struggles, it's almost, it's hard to, it's easy to forget all the amazing things that you are accomplishing in terms of children's development and learning, when you're trying to just face all these challenges every single day. So I think it's a really great point to get together with other people and also sort of celebrate and sort of step back and look at the higher level of, holy smokes, let's say I've been running this childcare organization for the last 10 years. I've helped, over 1,000 children improve in their literacy skills and this and that. Sometimes that can all be sort of missed, I think.
Well, and I think to that point is that we don't, with this whole reflection piece, we don't take enough time to really celebrate what you've done.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, we're drowning in all the problems.
Totally.
Of the staff or the children or the therapists or everything I'm trying to juggle. And really taking a step back, I know that if I can share a little story, I know that when I was going for a particular credential, there was a group of us that met every Tuesday for 2 years. They ended up, because being a director is so isolating, and again, I was the director of 2 group family daycares, a little different license, but still very isolated. And I knew only people who were at the top get you. So I literally would have them on speed dial. So for a particular time, whether so a new policy I made, maybe a family was upset, or a new interaction with a new staff member that I really wanted. So that connection to like people in the same position in the field is critical, is really, really critical. And then connecting and creating opportunities where they stay connected.
Yeah.
That's really very, very important.
Yeah, so awesome. So I think one of the themes we're hearing here is relationships super important, both within your organization, but also, looking to build those relationships with mentors in the community, in early childhood education outside of your organization. Marilyn, it's been a really awesome speaking to you today. If I'm listening to the podcast and I want to learn more about your work or get in touch with you, where's the best place for me to go?
Thank you so much. So I'm on Facebook, ECE Solutions, and then also my new website that came out a couple of weeks ago, ECE Solutions Inc. on www.
Awesome. Marilyn, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been great having you. As always, I've learned a lot myself with the pyramid model, and you're doing some great work. Keep it up. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ron. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes and leave a review. The Preschool Podcast is brought to you by Hi Mama. If you're anything like the thousands of teachers listening to the Preschool Podcast, you know how long it takes to fill out daily sheets, child portfolios, and lesson plans. And that's where Hi Mama saves the day. With an easy-to-use interface built by teachers for teachers, Hi Mama can cut the time you spend on documentation and parent engagement in half. Create and send beautiful daily sheets, photos, videos, and messages to parents in seconds, saving you time in your busy day. Podcast listeners can get a free tour with one of our community advisors. Go to HiMama.com and click the